The silent billionaire's wife, the walk of shame, the humid air of Rio de Janeiro clung to the marble pillars of the Copacabana Palace. But inside, the atmosphere was ice cold. Marina stood at the threshold of the grand ballroom, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric of her navy blue dress. It wasn't a designer piece. It didn't bear the logo of a Parisian fashion house or the shimmering crystals of a Milanese runway. It was a simple, elegant garment she had chosen because it felt like her. But in a room drowning in a sea of $50,000 gowns and inherited diamonds, her simplicity felt like a neon sign flashing outside her. She had come with a singular purpose: to find Roberto. He was set to give a speech that would change the lives of thousands of children in the favelas, and she needed to be by his side. She was late, delayed by a last-minute crisis at one of the community centers, and the urgency in her chest was now being replaced by a mounting sense of dread. Who let that in? A voice hissed, sharp enough to cut through the smooth jazz playing in the background. Marina didn't turn. She didn't have to. She could feel the weight of 100 judgmental gazes assessing her worth based on the thread count of her sleeves and the brand of her clutch. She was a woman weaving through a gilded doorway, unaware that she was about to become the centerpiece of the evening's most brutal entertainment, the Queen of Rios. Social scene. As Marina moved toward the grand staircase, a figure stepped into her path, blocking her way with the practiced arrogance of someone who owned the air they breathed. It was Veronica Mendez. To the socialites of Rio, Veronica was royalty. To Marina, she was a wall of sequins and Botox. "The catering entrance is around the back, dear," Veronica said, her voice dripping with a saccharine condescension that made Marina's skin crawl. "This area is reserved for guests who actually contributed to the gala." "I am a guest," Marina replied, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heart against her ribs. "And I'm not here to serve. I'm here to see Roberto Santos." A ripple of laughter erupted from the circle of women surrounding Veronica. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Roberto Santos? Veronica's friend, a woman whose face was pulled so tight she looked perpetually surprised, stepped forward. "And I suppose you're his long-lost sister? Or perhaps his cleaning lady?" "I have an invitation," Marina insisted, reaching for her purse, but she wasn't fast enough. Veronica stepped closer, her perfume something expensive and suffocating, filling Marina's senses. "Honey, look at yourself. This event costs $10,000 a ticket. People who shop at Target don't just wander into the Copacabana Palace VIP section." The humiliation the scene was attracting a crowd. Men in tuxedos and women in silk stopped their conversations to watch the plain woman get dismantled by the social elite. Charles, a member of the charity board, approached with a frown that suggested Marina was a stain on the carpet he needed to scrub away. "Is there a problem, Veronica?" Charles asked, his eyes never meeting Marina's. "This woman is making the guests uncomfortable." "Charles?" Veronica purred, her eyes flashing with malice. "She's clearly snuck in. Security should be more careful about the riffraff they allow inside." "Please," Marina whispered, her eyes stinging with the first thread of tears. "If you just let me explain." "My husband? Oh, here we go," Veronica interrupted, throwing her hands up in mock exasperation. "Next she'll tell us she's married to the man of the hour himself. She's probably a stalker hoping to snag a rich husband before the night is over." The laughter that followed was the breaking point. Marina felt the hot trail of a tear escape and slide down her cheek. She had spent her life building things, schools, centers, hope, and here. In a room full of philanthropists, she was being discarded like trash because her dress didn't cost a fortune. The security guard's hand was heavy on her elbow. It was a firm, humiliating grip that forced her to turn away from the staircase, away from her husband, and toward the exit. "Take her through the service entrance," Veronica commanded loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "It's more appropriate for her station." The arrival of the King Marina was halfway to the service door, her head bowed in a desperate attempt to hide her face. When the main doors of the ballroom didn't just open, they slammed. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Every head turned, every breath caught. Roberto Santos stepped into the light. He didn't look like a man who was attending a party. He He looked like a man who was arriving to survey his kingdom. His suit was a masterpiece of tailoring, but it was his eyes dark, sharp, and currently radiating a terrifying heat that held everyone captive. He didn't look at Charles. He didn't look at the board members. His gaze cut through the crowd like a laser until it landed on the woman being held by security. The guard froze. He let go of Marina's arm, as if her skin had suddenly turned into white-hot coal. Roberto walked. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, guests stumbling over their own feet to get out of his way. The air in the room changed instantly, shifting from the light scent of champagne to the heavy, electric charge of a coming storm. He reached Marina. With a tenderness that made the room gasp, he reached out and wiped the tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Roberto," she whispered. He didn't say a word to her yet. Instead, he turned his head slowly to face Veronica and Charles. His voice, when it finally came, was low, controlled, and sharp enough to draw blood. "Would someone like to explain to me," Roberto said, his voice carrying to the furthest corner of the hall, "why my wife is being escorted out of her own building through the service entrance?" The shattering of glass, the sound of Veronica's champagne glass hitting the marble floor was the only answer. It shattered into 1,000 glittering shards, mirroring the sudden destruction of her social standing. "Wife?" Charles stammered, his face turning a shade of gray that matched his expensive hair. "Roberto, there has been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Roberto stepped closer to Charles, who visibly recoiled. "You mean the fact that you didn't recognize Marina Santos? The founder of the Esperanza Educational Network? The woman who has built schools in 27 favelas while you were busy choosing the color of your pocket squares?" The room erupted into frantic whispers. Phones were whipped out, cameras flashing as the Queen of Rio stood, paralyzed in her own humiliation. "My wife doesn't wear diamonds because she prefers to fund scholarships for girls who would otherwise never see the inside of a classroom." Roberto continued, his voice growing in power. "She doesn't wear designer labels because she's too busy spending that money on computer labs for children who have never touched a keyboard." He turned his gaze back to Veronica, who looked as though she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. "And for the record," Roberto added, a cold smile touching his lips she didn't sneak in, "we bought the Copacabana Palace last year. Technically, you are all guests in her house, and I find myself questioning if certain board members are still a fit for our organization." The aftermath of the shift was instantaneous. Donna Isabella, the most respected philanthropist in the city, stepped forward and took Marina's hand. "Marina, darling, I've been waiting for you at the head table," she said, casting a withering look at the group of socialites. "It seems some people here require urgent lessons in both manners and basic humanity." As Roberto and Marina walked toward the ballroom, the crowd didn't just watch, they began to applaud. It started as a few claps and grew into a thunderous ovation that drowned out the sound of Veronica's sobbing as she fled for the exit, her reputation in ruins. Marina paused for a moment by the security guard who had held her arm. The man was trembling, his face burning with shame.
Right.
"It's easy to follow orders," Marina said softly, her dignity unshaken. "But it's much harder and much more important to question them when you know they are wrong." The lesson of the Copacabana, the weeks that followed, the story became a legend in Rio. It wasn't just about a rich husband defending his wife. It was about the death of an era where appearance was the only currency that mattered. Charles resigned from the board the next day. Veronica Mendez, once the gatekeeper of high society, disappeared from the social calendar. Months later, Rena was in her office at the foundation when her assistant announced a visitor. Veronica entered, but she was barely recognizable. The jewelry was gone. The arrogance was replaced by a hollowed-out look of genuine regret. "I want to volunteer," Veronica said, her voice shaking. "If you'll have me?" Marina looked at her, remembering her mother's words about grace and second chances. "Volunteers start at 7 a.m., Marina said calmly. "We serve breakfast to the students. If you're here, you're working. No cameras, no sequins." Veronica nodded, a single, honest tear falling this time. Conclusion. Beyond the labels, as Marina stood on the stage at the end of the year. receiving a standing ovation from people who now saw her for her heart rather than her dress. She realized her greatest victory wasn't the revenge. It was the transformation. Beside her sat the security guard, now the head of her professional training program, and in the front row was a student from her very first school. Now holding a university diploma, the golden rule isn't just a saying. It's a foundation. We are all more than the clothes we wear, the cars we drive, or the titles we carry.